Hello, everyone. My name is Chris Morgan, and I'm the president of We Build Learning. I'll be your moderator for today. Thanks for coming. And happy Global Accessibility Awareness Day. First, I'd like to go over a few logistics. All but the panelists will be muted during this session, but we'd love to hear your questions and feedback. If at any time during the discussion you have questions for any of the panelists, please feel free to enter your questions in the chat section. You can access this by clicking the chat button at the bottom of the Zoom screen. We've dedicated time at the end of the session to go over any questions and as many questions as time allows. This session is also being recorded and we'll make it available to all participants afterward. I'd like to welcome all of our participants or all of our panelists and give them an opportunity to introduce themselves and to explain their backgrounds as it relates to accessibility. We'll start with Dr. Anjali Agarwal. Anjali?
Hello, everyone. I'm Anjali Agarwal, co-founder and executive director, Samarthyam, civil society organization. I'm also a member of NITI Aayog, which is the National Institute for Transforming India. As a professional consultant on accessibility, mobility, and WASH, I've been working for the last 27 years. Thank you.
Thanks, Anjali. Mansi, you want to go next?
Hi, Chris. Hi, everyone. I'm Mansi Joshi. I'm a para badminton athlete. I'm in this session as a para athlete. Last year I play badminton. So last year I won a gold medal at para badminton world championship in Basel in Switzerland. I have been playing the sport since a few years now. Before I was a para athlete, I was also a software engineer, and I used to work as a software developer at a company named Atos. I have been I met with an accident on my way to work, and after that I'm just in this space of being a para athlete also, and learning everything again and living this life with the best possible zeal and enthusiasm. So it's just like I'm just a para athlete in this session, and I'm so happy that I'm attending this session with all of you and understanding and the exact what is the real need of the day, and I'm really happy to be part of this session. Thank you.
Thanks, Mansi, and congratulations on your gold medal. Kurt?
Hi, Chris. Thanks, everyone, for joining. I'm Kurt Kurdenek. I am the Chief Technology Officer for Vista Higher Learning. Vista is a language learning company focused primarily on schools and universities. I've been in the education technology space for over 25 years, 15 years or so of experience with accessibility, and I lead the efforts at Vista for accessibility with our digital products.
Thanks, Kurt. Dennis?
Good afternoon, good evening, and good morning to everyone. Thanks for having me. My name is Dennis Kwan. I'm Director of Document Accessibility Solutions for Crawford Technologies. We're based in Toronto, Canada, and we are also in through North America and around the world. I focus on document accessibility, so anything that has to do with digital assets that are non-accessible, and I've been in sort of the document space for about 30 some years or so, and I'm a subject matter expert in document accessibility. So thanks for having me.
Thank you, Dennis. Rajni?
Perfect. Thanks, Chris. Welcome, everyone. This is Rajni. I'm a vice president with QA InfoTech, company that focuses on software quality and testing services. I have over 17 years of industry experience, and of the varied set of areas that I work with in the space of software quality, I've been fortunate to get my hands really deep as far as accessibility goes, digital accessibility, all the way from delivery management to testing to training to workshops, so on and so forth. And it's personally very gratifying for me to be associated with a company like QA InfoTech, where It's really on a mission to make digital accessibility a global reality. And in our organization, literally GAAD, the Global Accessibility Awareness Day, is not an annual phenomenon. It's a very regular, ongoing phenomenon where we encourage even our regular users to, use assistive technologies, use digital assets without the mouse, for instance. So it's very, very gratifying to be a part of such an organization. So I'm here today to share all of those learnings and experiences, and more importantly, also learn from all the other industry and societal stalwarts here. So thank you so much, and a warm welcome to everyone.
Thanks, Rajni. And last but certainly not least, Ankush.
Hey, thanks, Chris. Hello, everyone. It's a great pleasure for me to be a part of this panel. My name is Ankush Garg, and I'm a low vision accessibility expert at InfoTech. I've been working in the space of digital accessibility for about 5 years now, and this has been a wonderful journey so far. I worked with a number of clients in different domains like e-learning, e-commerce to enterprise applications as well. And I use different assistive tools like screen readers, keyboards, Zoom, and high contrast for my day-to-day activities. I have a career objective of making this digital world more accessible for all in order to transform and empower the lives of persons with disabilities. Thank you so much for inviting me to this panel discussion. I'm looking forward to share my thoughts with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ankush, and welcome everybody. So let's start with our first question. COVID-19 has thrown the world out of gear in a variety of ways. While we all align to the new normal, how has COVID-19 impacted people with disabilities, especially from the perspective of digital consumption? I'd like to start this one with Mansi, if we could.
Hi, Chris. Thank you for your question. So definitely COVID-19 has impacted all of us, and as people with disabilities, it has impacted our sector or us the most. I think we all are at our home in our like having a good time with our family. But I remember like few days back, I went out for shopping for groceries, and there were huge lines, and I was asked to wait in line, and people were like, why do you even come out of your house if you have so much of problem standing in queues? And also even going out is a little bit of issue when when such things are happening digitally. I feel everybody has our whole of our workspaces have shifted to our homes. Me as an athlete, I'm working out from home, and I think everybody are shifting our bases and our workplaces at our home. So definitely it's impacting, it has impacted our way to work. And I think it is good that, we are at our home in our in a space which we really enjoy working. We are saving so much of time traveling, and when we say that access physically, when there are barriers, I feel our workplaces or workspaces which are at our homes are giving us more liberty to be more independent and be more vocal, especially on the digital platforms.
Great, so that's interesting. So staying at home is in many ways a benefit, it sounds like. Mansi, is that correct?
Yeah, definitely.
Anjali, your thoughts?
Yes, thank you, Chris, for this question. I think it is very challenging as the digital world is not accessible to cross-disability people. The digital divide has led to discrimination and has made us feel dependent. In fact, it should be the other way around. In the COVID-19 lockdown situation, people with disabilities are majorly connecting with the world through smartphones, laptops. A great example is WhatsApp, because even getting essential services delivered at doorstep is possible through a small platform like WhatsApp. I also want to give an example of a device like Alexa, which has made me feel very, very independent. I'm with muscular dystrophy. I can't get up or go around the house to switch on the lights or the AC or the TV and many other gadgets. And this particular device has helped me a lot. But in case if these kind of things are not accessible to speech and hearing impaired people, to people with visual impairment, both blind and low vision, the life is going to be very, very challenging. And COVID-19 has taught us that we really need to put ourselves in the forefront to see that there's no digital divide anymore.
Great, thank you. Ankush, your thoughts on this?
Thanks, Chris. The COVID-19 has certainly impacted our lives in several different ways. We are already seeing a digital transformation where all of the businesses are going virtual, right? So I've come across many apps that I've never used earlier, but now I have to deal with them on a daily basis because this is certainly the need of the day. Now, as a differently abled user, I've faced many challenges with some of the apps, especially if we talk about the online food delivery apps or the online grocery portals, because these were not designed with accessibility in mind. As a working professional, I've also faced many accessibility challenges with some of the remote communication platforms while working from home. So I believe overall COVID-19 has given us an opportunity to see the real picture of our web, where a lot of things are still not very much accessible, and we have to work on it to ensure that our web is equally accessible for all. Thank you.
Thank you, and that's a good segue to the next question, which is, you know, as you're all advocates, practitioners of digital accessibility, and often we all run into folks that fear that implementing digital accessibility is going to be a daunting effort. So if you're speaking to those folks, or if you're thinking about that perspective, what are some of the tips or experiences that you have had that might be helpful to them? And I'd like to start this from a product development perspective. Can we start with Dennis?
Sure. Well, that's a very good question. I think when we talk about how and why we should be doing it, first of all, we know it's the right thing to do. And certainly there's a lot of litigation and legislation in the background at this point in time, which is really probably not the right reason. But if you really think about the population that's out there in terms of the number of people that do have a disability, whether it's visual, cognitive, or whatever the case may be, that's really an untapped market. I mean, if any company that's out there sort of says, hey, I'm going to create a product and I'm going to sell it to somebody, well, I've got my existing group of individuals that are probably sighted and so on, and that may not have a disability, but certainly this is green fields for most of these individuals out there, and you can certainly go after that market. And if you really think about the numbers, I mean, it's greater than any minority group typically in any country that's out there. So it's a huge population to go after. And certainly, as we say, it's the right thing to do. It also benefits, those that don't have a disability ultimately. So I think it's a very important area, not only from an employment standpoint, but also from a market standpoint as well.
Great. So from a business perspective, some people might think, this is not our core business, but actually they're missing an opportunity when they think that way. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Kurt, your thoughts on this? Tips or things that you've seen that work well when you're implementing digital accessibility?
Sure. Thanks, Chris. Yeah, I will. I mean, it is a daunting task often, and it does require investment. I agree with Dennis, though the risks are high, the legal financial risks, yes, but those can be used as levers sometimes internally to generate executive buy-in and consensus. But the benefit of doing good by doing right, so to speak, for your customers, to Dennis's point, it's a large population of people that may have various forms of learning challenges, and these benefits extend beyond just kind of the obvious examples. We found in pursuing work, I've found over doing this for many years, that the goodwill it generates with the users, the students, in our case, the students and the teachers, outweighs the investment. So ironically, it has a strong positive return on investment. And I think that's what many companies fail to see. They just view it as a cost, not as a benefit. And the challenges of implementation are significant. I mean, we have the benefit of a strong engineering team to help us with this, but it is also very important to know what you don't know. and work with partners. I mean, we have the benefit of working with QA InfoTech, and QA InfoTech helps us understand where our gaps are. That helps us focus our work, our investment, our time, but also recognize, when we're achieving the objectives we're setting out to meet. So having good partners, having a strong plan, building a strong financial case, recognizing those benefits that come not just from the avoidance of potential legal costs or financial costs, but the benefits of goodwill from customers are my recommendations.
Great, thank you. Yeah, so yeah, and maybe as a follow-up, we can kind of get some resources together on how, to both your and Dennis's point on how, it can be a revenue-generating concept rather than just a cost. That's kind of an interesting concept that I think, certainly along with all the litigation and just that it's the right thing to do helps the decision forward. Rajni, I know you work with a lot of companies in terms of digital accessibility. What are some of the tips or best practices that you've seen?
Absolutely. In fact, Dennis and Kurt so very well set the premise for me. Say for anyone starting anything new, it is certainly going to be a daunting effort, especially when the product is very mature from several other attributes and it's already out there in the market. But interestingly, a study shows in the US that out of 10 million web pages that were analyzed, 98% of them do not comply with WCAG. That's a huge, huge number. And people fail to understand that, again, as previously the other panelists mentioned, taking care of digital accessibility serves not just people with disabilities, but several others as well. So where does one start, right? Say, I'd like to compare this again from the domain that I come from, very similar to kind of a physical or a medical check that you do. Let's say you've never done a physical check all your life. You're not going to start popping in pills or, start off with a diet regimen straight away. You're first going to go get an assessment done to see where you stand, what is your health status, what are your gaps, and how do you take this forward. That's exactly what I'd recommend out here in terms of start off with an accessibility assessment. Understand your gaps, prioritize your roadmap, and take it forward from there. The good thing is WCAG does not enforce it as a one-size-fits-all kind of a thing. It gives you a lot of flexibility saying, whether it's level A compliance, level AA, level AAA, depending on your maturity, depending on your product, pick and choose and then get started. But I think the one important thing is don't make it just a one-time effort. Accessibility, digital accessibility really has to become a part of your organization and engineering culture, because only then will it be sustainable and scalable. In fact, it's very welcoming to see a number of initiatives happening recently. There's one initiative called Valuable 500, which is reaching out to 500 global CEOs, globally MNCs, and getting their stakes and getting their approvals to include digital accessibility as part of their business leadership agenda. And companies like Microsoft and Google have already signed up for it. And similar to what Dennis is saying, we know the other side. We know the legal suits that are coming in, especially when digital accessibility is not in compliance. So start small, but definitely do your assessment to understand the gaps and take it forward from there, but make it a part of your organization's culture. Those would be my tips based on our experience.
Great, thank you very much, Rajni. Great suggestions. We have a number of panelists from India, which is in the middle of not only a digital mission, but a digital accessibility mission. There's been some recent news that is very relevant to this panel. So we learned that the app India has mandated for contact tracing during COVID-19 was found not to be fully accessible, which has obvious repercussions for many people. What can we learn from this as we think about how Indian and other companies can plan accessibility up front? In this case, we can assume that the app was relatively new. What are things that we can do to plan for those things up front? And I'd like to open this up to Dr. Anjali as a start.
Thank you, Chris. You can call me Anjali, please. This is the Arogya Setu app, which is a health app, which has been launched by the government of India. And it is mandatory for many government officers and now, in fact, everyone to download this app and use it while traveling or while going to office, whatever you do. The app is found to be not accessible to people with disabilities, especially those with visual and hearing impairments. There are almost 30 million people in India with these disabilities. There's a gap, which is a big gap, that needs to be addressed soon. We have written to the government of India saying that it's not accessible, there are a lot of issues. And we are also saying by the time that there's a law in India that says that all apps, all ICT devices, anything that's been developed online for information and which is technologically developed has to be accessible. Also, the Accessible India campaign drives it mandatory to have the third vertical, which is the ICT vertical, to be accessible. Now, what has had happened? One, that there was no procurement policy mandated on accessibility. Two, that there was no user testing. So the app was made live and people started using it. And when we started using it, we found that there are a lot of flaws. What is important that we need to understand that an app has to be made accessible at the procurement stage itself, and it should be done as not an afterthought. It should be done, well in the beginning, as what Rajni said very precisely, like an assessment we do for a physical environment also, we audit. Similarly, the app should have been audited, looked into what is going wrong, what is going right for people with disabilities, and then it should be made live. I also want to highlight one more thing. This app is not only used by people with disabilities or without disabilities. It is used by many senior citizens and super senior citizens. So having accessibility built in from the very beginning actually makes sense for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. That raises a good point. Usability testing from people with disabilities. Now, I've worked with a number of different companies who certainly there are automated tools to tell you whether something is accessible or not, but that doesn't mean it's usable all the time. I'd like to ask Ankush this question. Can you explain the difference between those from your perspective?
Sure, Chris. So basically, accessibility is a subset of usability itself. Usability states that your user interface should be easy and should be predictable enough for anyone to use with the ease. So any user can access or navigate the workflows of an application with ease and without having to provide any additional instructions. But when we talk about accessibility, it specifically covers the users who are not relying on the conventional input methods like the mouse, but they are relying on some assistive tools. Like I am a low vision user, I'm using a keyboard as a primary input method. I'm using zoom and magnification and high contrast as an assistive tool while accessing an application. So accessibility covers all of the user scenarios where user has some sort of biological impairment or user has some sort of situational disability and he's relying on some sort of assistive tool.
So to paraphrase, and I'll ask Rajni to jump in here too, you really, to do true user testing, you really have to cover the gamut of assistive tools as well as running your automated tests. So you have to test using all of the assistive tools that people might use and see what the experience is in your application. Is that accurate?
Absolutely, absolutely. Because your say toolbars, for instance, take you only so far. There is so much more that needs to be covered in terms of testing. And to look at sheer numbers out here, right? This specific application we are talking about, Arogya Setu, the contact tracing application here in India, which has been made mandatory. About a week ago, it had 10 crore registered users, which is basically 100 million registered users. And for a country of a population of 130 crores, there is a long way to go. And digital applications are clearly the front runners in terms of masses adopting, and taking in the information. But what is preventing them? Especially this particular application had issues around both accessibility, or rather still has, I won't say had, issues around both accessibility and security, which prevented the mass adoption. And organizations like Samarthyam that Dr. Anjali runs and QA Infotech, in fact, Ankush himself tested the application and we've all given the feedback back to the government of India. So a few quick things that I'd like to, reiterate out here. See, out of the people with disabilities, if you take 50% of them are uneducated. Now, this overlaps with a very significant uneducated and low tech skill but still digitally savvy population in a country like India. So when you want to launch, this big an application within a short period of time, again, you may not have time for comprehensive testing, but accessibility fortunately gives you a bunch of low-hanging fruits, especially if you take care of things like alt text, keyboard accessibility. These are going to significantly enhance and improve the accessibility of the application. And again, even here, to incorporate these as well, you don't have to rely on everything in-house. There is a huge crowd out there in a country again like India. Folks from organizations like Samarthyam, from QA Infotech, we can work and give back, for instance, alt text for images, captions for varied transcripts. So the power is huge. You can start off small, but never ever miss on these important pieces because they enhance the adoption of the application right from the get-go. And for something of mass as this particular scale, this becomes very important. And what I also want to reiterate out here is this is not just in a country like India. For instance, even in developed countries like in Canada, for instance, in Ontario, there was a lady who filed a lawsuit saying the Ministry of Health web application is not accessible. So situations like today, which has really pushed all of us to go digital, accessibility and corresponding usability of an application is more important than ever before.
Great, thank you. All right, so let's jump to our next question. So there have been, there's usually or always a fear that incorporating accessibility will impact other elements of an application. So such as the look and feel, the overall performance, timelines for the content, etc. COVID-19 has shown that there's a lot of room for innovation for and by people with disabilities, and those innovations can often benefit people without disabilities. At the same time, there are constantly new technologies being introduced that can have real impact on usability and accessibility. So what I'd like to know are what are some of the innovations that you've seen or that you think might take hold in the future as it relates to accessibility? And I'd like to start this one with Dennis, if that works.
Sure. Well, there's a lot of things that are happening, obviously, and technology is a great thing to apply to the world of accessibility at this point in time. And certainly when we think about that, there's a lot of new innovations from AI to certainly a lot of assistive technology that is, continually changing at this point in time. A lot of folks don't understand the fact, and I come from the world of document accessibility, all you're doing is adding metadata so that information can be easily navigated, and it obviously can become usable ultimately. But the problem comes down to how do you innovate that and do that at scale? When we talk about working with folks like QA Infotech, they help us provide things like alt text, for example, like testing, and many other factors that are all obviously involved. You can innovate using, technologies to maybe tag items automatically, automate tools to do things at scale and speed. But at the end of the day, you still have the final question and final issue, which is how do I test to ensure that it is fully usable? So there's a lot of great new things that are happening in this world today. I spend a lot of time speaking about this and attending a lot of assistive technology conferences and so on. And we certainly work with our developers on our products and so on that we apply in the enterprise environment. A lot of stuff is coming up. I think what's the real change that has happened right now is that accessibility is now at the forefront as a result. You're getting more funding and a lot more interest in it as a result. There's a lot more monies and development available for this space.
Great, thank you. Mansi, have you seen any innovations that have impressed you, or do you foresee any innovations that could be helpful?
I think when we talk about digital accessibility, I think we also have to not forget that in India, people do not just, speak one language. We speak multiple languages in our country, and even if information is available in English, if we are not able to translate into our regional languages, we are not able to read it. So we are not. We definitely as end users have a lot of barriers in the digital space, be it language and of course. So I think it definitely adds to the cost, and that is what companies who are trying to universalize it, they don't consider this point especially, and thus those apps or those things are usually not accessible to people. So I think when you ask me what are the changes which I would be looking in future, I feel that when this is the time which is actually going to change how we are looking up at digital accessibility. And by this, I also think that in India, especially when all the end users are considered, we have that kind of accessibility in all the systems and all our applications that we are using right now.
So that's kind of, I mean, I see what you're saying. I mean, there's certainly a lot of work going around translation technologies and innovations in that area. I could see that converging into, applications that are accessible so that you're not only translating, but you're translating in a way that is going to be accessible for all populations, and why that might benefit. Great suggestion. Kurt, have you seen anything that impresses you, or do you foresee anything?
Yeah, I think that the challenge for us, being a language learning company, is that almost the definition of language learning historically has been around physical skills, speaking, listening, writing. And in the last really 10 or 15 years, the entire discipline, educational discipline, has had to change its approach from that to understanding the interpretation of meaning through different expressions. So it hasn't necessarily been technology tools per se, but there's been a real change in the way the educational tools have been built and continuing to be built to support that change in approach, and also the process, and in some cases even the education of the teachers themselves, to adjust, to understand. It's very common to say a course is based on a communicative approach. People communicate with each other to understand and learn the language. It's a better approach than to say, go learn this vocabulary, go learn these grammar rules, and then apply it. However, that often translates into speaking practice. So we spent quite a bit of time working with schools and understanding our tool sets in that context. And I think there's still a lot of innovation going on with the schools and with the applications to solve those problems and help the teachers, help ultimately the students, help the disability departments at the schools cope with these unique language learning challenges at some scale across the university or the school.
So somewhat related to what Mansi was saying is that, in the concept of teaching and learning from a language perspective, because you're dealing with so much different media and so many different ways that you traditionally have taught, requires innovation, not only in the way that you teach, but how to make that accessible. Is that right?
Yeah, certainly. I think the WCAG standards, especially the AA standards, have taken some significant steps there. Descriptive audio, for example, in video, obviously captioning and whatnot, that has helped. But you're right, that's been a key part of how we navigate that challenge.
Great, thanks. Ankush, you mentioned, well, first I'd like to hear any innovations that you have seen or that you foresee, but in particular, I'm wondering if there are assistive technology innovations that you have seen or that you foresee.
Yeah, Chris, so a lot of innovations have been happening in the space of accessibility engineering, especially as we are seeing evolution in machine learning and artificial intelligence. There are several technologies like image recognition, speech recognition, and live captioning, sign language recognition. So all of these technologies have a great potential, and it can certainly make lives more easier for persons with different abilities. As a low vision user, this image recognition technology and the Google Vision API has certainly helped me a lot, because it automatically generates the alt text of any image which is being posted on the internet, whether it is a Google platform, Microsoft platform, or even Facebook platform. And there's one more thing that was there in your question, and I want to make it clear here that implementing accessibility has nothing to do with design or performance of an application. It is just a myth. It is not true. Accessible websites can be stunningly beautiful because all of the accessibility features are visually hidden. So they have nothing to do with the design. You can refer to the alt text of an image. It would not affect the design, but it would certainly help users like me who cannot see that image or who cannot perceive that information. At the same time, implementing accessibility would increase your search engine optimization, and it would increase your user base as well.
That's a fantastic point. So, and just to build on that, because most of the accessibility standards are text-based,
right?
It shouldn't hurt your performance, but you're also adding a lot of metadata to a page that may not have it otherwise, and so it should improve your search results. So for those of you out there, we've shared several business benefits. That's another one. So even for all users, your search engine optimization is going to improve if you follow basic practices. There's also the point that Dennis made where, you've got, and I love the way you put it, Dennis, you've got a population that is usually larger than any minority population in any country. So it's an untapped market, as well as removing the risk of litigation. And thank you again, Ankush, for pointing out that it's a myth that you're going to hurt the visual aspects of your application. Okay, great. So let's go on to just I'd like to give everybody a chance to just kind of, this has certainly been a prescriptive approach with these questions. So I'd like to give each of our panelists an opportunity to kind of just speak from their heart, their mind about what they think, what they're feeling is the future of accessibility and what companies out there can do to improve or to move down that path. So let's start with, let's go in the same order that we started in our introductions and start with Anjali.
Thank you, Chris. Actually want to say from my heart that I'm going to hire Q&A InfoTech for making our website accessible, because Ankush just gave the correct, fantastic point that it does not just look at the web accessibility from the point of view of accessibility, but it should look good also. It should be appealing to people. Now coming to how the accessibility of the digital space can be looked into in the future perspective, I strongly feel that we should look towards a larger goal of building the accessible digital ecosystem. So the outreach should not be extended just to the software programmers, but also to cover the ecosystem such as policy, research, and allied fields. And accessibility isn't a topic that just affects some of us, but I think all of us. And as what Google innovatively put it together, I want to quote it: the accessibility problems of today are the mainstream breakthroughs of tomorrow. So let's commit ourselves on this very, very auspicious global accessibility awareness day and work towards disability inclusive digital agenda. Thank you.
Thank you. Mansi, your thoughts?
Yeah, hi. So this has been great. Like I would like to, I loved Ankush's point that, adding alt text to anything will definitely help in search engine optimization. And what I've seen is that if we just follow the protocols and just the standards which are laid out for developing the websites or any digital platform, I think that will save a lot of amount of money that is that we have to spend after we have to redesign the website where accessibility is not considered. So if we just use that one software code, which we write it in the beginning, I think it will save a lot of money later on in the future when at the time of testing or when at the time of deployment, when these bugs are raised, it will not add all those points, I think. So I think that we need to implement all the standards right before, especially in the design and development phase, and not during the unit testing phase or during the deployment phase, or maybe end user acceptance test.
So certainly, like everything else we've learned in application development, you got to start from the beginning and think about it up front. Is that accurate?
Yes, that's what I want.
Yeah. Okay. Dennis?
Well, it's interesting. We talk about this by creating a culture of inclusion. So this is really where we talk about how we do development, how we implement all this stuff. One interesting statistic that I note is that, if you've already done all the work, testing and everything, and suddenly you have to come back to do this, do this retrofit, it's actually 10 times the cost to do that. So, when we talk to organizations out there, we tell them, think about it from the start. Don't, whether it be you're creating a website or creating a document in Word for that matter, as simple as that, because later on you're going to spend a lot of money just trying to refix that document and try to make it accessible, and forget about all these lawsuits and all that other fun stuff that's going to happen after the fact because you just didn't comply. But think about the fact that you're adding to that market that I talked about earlier on.
Great, and I'll bring that up because that relates to one of the questions that we have from our participants. So I'll bring that up in a minute.
Sorry, I was cutting out for a second. So I wanted to say that the benefit, the energy that can be brought into the business and the culture by embracing accessibility and universal design in general shouldn't be underestimated. And it shouldn't be approached simply, again, as, well, we have to do this because, this is what, the law or the regulations tell us to do. There's a lot of energy here. A lot of people get excited by this. And I think companies underestimate that. And that itself fuels the organization. It fuels the motivation within the organization to make positive strides and gains. Dennis is right. I mean, if you try to retrofit at the very end of a project, you're going to spend a lot more money counterbalancing bad decisions. But Ankush is also very right that this is not about making your sites functional or ugly or utilitarian. The benefits, the cross benefits with accessibility for use on multiple platforms, devices, mobile devices in particular, is significant. People want those benefits. If you're outside in the bright sunlight, contrast is very important to you, regardless of your abilities or disabilities. So it's as much about making your sites better for everybody, not just for specific types of users. And philosophically, that type of approach helps open up doors within the business and doors within people to embrace this in ways that it might otherwise just be seen as, well, hey, this is some sort of compliance challenge we have to overcome.
Great point. I'll come back to that as well. Rajni, your thoughts?
Thanks, Chris. Even before I start off responding, right? Wow, what a bunch of interesting responses and perspectives. For a second, I take off my hat as a panelist, and I definitely want to say I thoroughly enjoyed listening to all of you, all the perspectives, all the way from Ankush to Chris, Dennis. Thank you so much, everyone. It's been wonderful listening to all of you. So, if I've got to summarize this whole thing, take a step back, I want to just talk 6 holistic takeaways that I have out here. See, this is the first global pandemic that we are all witnessing in a digital world. So what are my key takeaways? A product that is digitally accessible helps. Number one, obviously people with disabilities. Number two, it strengthens an organization's SEO positioning. The moment you take care of the accessibility elements of content, the overall intuitiveness of the application, the alt text for the images, the transcript for the videos, your SEO ranking significantly rises against competition. Number three, your branding, your marketing, your loyalty, you're able to win new customers. A study continues to show that people are really invested in products and applications that continue to support the communities that they operate in. So number three, there you're going to significantly benefit. Number four, we are all significantly a digitally savvy aging population. And as we move into the senior segment of the age, we've got to realize that we may or may not be a person with disability, but it's only by about 53, age of 53, that 83% of the disabilities set in. So the investment that we make today also means that it's an investment that we're making for all of our future, whether or not we hit that stage when we get to that particular age. Number five, globally, again, there are a lot of uneducated people. Catering for digital accessibility serves a huge market out there. And as a side benefit of all of these, number six, you're going to protect yourself against any potential lawsuits and all of those as well. Just in the United States last year, there were 11,000 lawsuits of people with disabilities that had raised on applications and products stating that they were not accessible. So as a side benefit, you're going to benefit out there as well. So these are my 6 key takeaways overall, where I'd like to conclude saying digitally accessible products really create a global win-win situation where it empowers societies together to fight unprecedented tough times like what we are facing right now. My humble request again to make this a part of every organization's culture, every individual's culture, create a lot of sensitization. Just to give you an example here, my manager Mukesh's daughter, she is a 6th grader. She has recently started a petition asking for signatures, online signatures in India, saying let every application not just be made in India, but also digitally accessible and made in India. So that's the first step that she is taking towards a global digital accessibility initiative. If this is the kind of sensitization that even our younger generation is able to take, I think now is the time for us to invest. As some of the United Nations representatives put it, securing the rights of people with disabilities and investing in digital accessibility is an investment we are making in the common future for all of us. So even if you've not done it so far, it is never too late. Let's just jump in, embrace, because this is what the new digital world that awaits us is really looking for. That's my takeaways and summarization of the entire thing.
Great, thank you. Ankush?
Yeah, accessibility is certainly a real need of the day, and every business should try to incorporate accessibility at each and every level of the organization. Whether it is a designer, it is a developer, product manager, or even content contributor. So everyone is equally responsible to embrace accessibility within their core functional areas. I agree with the words that has been already said, that a business would be more compliant and more efficient if accessibility is built into the culture of the organization. And on the social part, I believe all of the educational, engineering, and corporate institutions should work together to promote digital accessibility awareness within the society, because that is again a really important aspect. They can conduct CSR workshops, they can conduct trainings, webinars, where they can involve real persons with disabilities so that everyone can understand the need and importance of accessibility in the life of an individual. Like this, I've also got a chance to interact with students of one of the schools where I had 3 training sessions with them on digital accessibilities. I believe programs like this can certainly make a difference in our society, and together we can make this world a better place to live for all. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Deb Castiglione, and I apologize for not being there with you today. I am actually at a coding boot camp. I am learning computer code so that I can work with developers and engineers in developing accessible code in the future. One thing that I think will occur as a result of the COVID-19 virus is that we will have greater usability for everyone. More and more people needed to go online to do more things, and people are finding out what's easy to do, what's hard to do, and I think as a result of that, things are going to change and things are going to be made easier for everyone. I just want to remind you to think small and start somewhere. You don't need to do everything at once. I also want you to think about universal design and the larger audience. There are different things that you can do that are going to benefit a greater number than the person that you're actually doing that technique for. For example, alt text. If you write alt text, typically the only person that benefits from the alt text is the individual who is blind or visually impaired using a screen reader. But you can actually take alt text and incorporate it into the main body content. Granted, you need to make some edits, but when you do that, you are helping more than just those individuals with visual impairment. You're also helping individuals with learning disabilities and others to get a better understanding and receive that information as well. One other thing I want to encourage you to do is think about choices and options. When people have choices and options, you can benefit a larger population. For example, if you have a text document, then to provide it also in audio format is going to benefit somebody that perhaps doesn't have the time to sit down and read, but can listen to the information.
We've got some time for some panelists or for some participant questions. A couple of things that I'd like to touch on real quickly that relate to some of those questions. One, the concept of culture has come up many times during this session from different panelists, and how it not only takes a change in culture to embrace this as a company or as an organization, but it also benefits the culture when you do so. And I just opened this up to all the panelists. Are there kind of things that you've seen organizations do successfully to start changing the culture in the direction of accessibility? Any thoughts on that?
Oh, Chris, I can jump in. I think that it's a cultural change for many reasons. One is that it affects all aspects of the business. So legal compliance is one piece, but the product development, the engineering, the sales and marketing, the production operations, everything in the business needs to embrace these changes for it to work well through to the customers. So that's why the cultural change is so important. It can't just be one person or one department that's responsible for this. But again, it really is, it's in my experience and in looking at some other companies who have embraced accessibility, it is, as I mentioned, it's an energizer. It can really galvanize companies and people in companies and teams to work together to do good for the customers and for the users of the applications. It's very gratifying to see that when it happens.
Can I just add into this?
Of course.
So I want to say that we have been talking about lawsuits, we have been talking about legal mandates, but I think what is important is that, and you know, the law cannot bring the change. It's us who can bring the change by ourselves, by taking it not as a culture, but also taking it as a habit, as a fashion, because we have been talking about fashionable things. So why not have digital accessibility as a fashion to make sure that each and everything we do in our organization, that what Samarthyam has done, from just talking about gender equality perspective also, we make sure that everybody, when we are hiring someone, when we are contracting our work, so we look at the gender equality. Similarly, for accessibility, we make sure that each and everything we do is accessible to all kind of life cycle generational people. So it's just not people with disabilities or older people, but anybody who comes through, even a child, even a pregnant woman. So I think it's just understanding and imbibing in ourselves And I always keep quoting sleep access, eat access, and drink access. Nothing else. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Others?
And if I may jump in there, Chris, again, I can speak based on what happens at QA Infotech. The company wants to lead by example. It's not that, we continuously keep saying, oh, it's got to become a part of the culture. We take it on ourselves as a responsibility as well. So a few sessions that we did last year, not everything necessarily translates or has to translate to business, right? Some of it is the responsibility, the social responsibility we take on as well. So we did a bunch of workshops, for instance, in the NCR area, the Noida capital region last year, from two different angles. One, we said anyone and everyone who wants to come understand this particular topic, the doors are open. Just come over. We will do a workshop for you to help you understand what this is. So we had right from students to housewives to a range of people who really came in, right, to really understand what digital accessibility is. Similarly, we did another session where we said anyone who is a person with disability and who's looking to build a career in this particular space, we'll help you with all the material. It does not mean you're going to necessarily work with QA Infotech, but we'll help you, take that step forward in the right direction. So when we do all of this, the rest of our employees are seeing this, right? It's literally like a parent trying to tell something to a child, but leading by example. My child is going to learn something much better when she sees me doing the right things the right way rather than me just telling her. So we try to lead by example by doing things, and to that extent a lot has been happening, is what I can say from a QA Infotech standpoint.
Great, thank you, Rajni. Okay, let's take a couple of questions from our participants. One that I think may be easy for some of the panelists to answer is, can you share any stats on the population size or the population who need accessibility compliance, so the size of the population? Can anybody take that question?
I can jump in.
Great.
As per the World Health Organization and as per the World Bank, 15% population of any developing country is with disability. Adding to it is around 25 to 30% percentage of people who are senior citizens, who are also disadvantaged because of low vision, because of hearing issues, because of mobility issues. So we are talking about around 55% population. To add to it is another population of children with disabilities, people with medical problems, people with reduced mobility because of obese, because of being diabetic, because of heart problems. So in fact, we are talking about more than 99% population. So where's the question of 1% population which is not disabled? Everybody is aging. And I'm sure we don't have a formula to share with us that we can stop aging process. We are going to get old for sure. So it's 100% population that we are talking about.
Great answer, thank you. Another question came up, and this is a little more difficult to answer. So one of the questions is, what's the percent of overall cost that an engineering team should think about when they're making product, when trying to make an existing product accessible? So if they're thinking about their overall cost, about what percent of that should they think about in terms of spend for accessibility?
If I may jump in out here again from the product and the testing side of things. See, again, this depends on at what stage you are incorporating for accessibility. The question almost looks like they are trying to incorporate it upfront as opposed to a product that's already out there in the market. So obviously, when it is going to be earlier in the stages, it is going to be much cheaper than compared to later in the stages. But the good thing about accessibility is re-engineering is also relatively easy. So more than the cost, I will talk about it in terms of a timeline standpoint, right? So even a fairly complex application when it comes to accessibility can be easily audited in a time frame of about, I want to say 3, maximum 4 weeks, kind of a focused effort. So you can map it and relate it to your, the entire life cycle and the complexity of the product. So let's say it is a product that has been developed over multiple sprints, multiple releases going out, and let's say it's 1 year of an investment that's already gone in. Even then, with a 3 to maximum 4 week of an effort, you will be able to get your initial assessment audit done. Subsequent to which, of course, you're going to prioritize based on the defects that come in. So within, I would say, a 2 to 3 month effort, you should be able to achieve a fair level of accessibility. Is the timeline view I'd like to give. Maybe Kurt and Dennis can add to this as well.
Yeah, I would agree that there is no magic formula. It depends on the app and the state it's in, and how how the front end is built, and a lot of other things. I would say I agree. A good assessment up front is key to estimating the work that's necessary, and it doesn't all need to be done. You don't have to think about this as completely a holistic exercise. You can take small steps within the WCAG guidelines to make improvements, and you can think about this incrementally and build your investment case around that. You may have certain compliance issues you have to deal with. It might force you into faster timeframes or not, but small steps can be made without much cost to get you going, and that helps build upon the investment case, get positive feedback on those steps, and then that helps build the investment case for the next step and the next step until ultimately you are fully compliant with the standards.
Yeah, I kind of look at it from the perspective also as the opportunity cost as well. The first go round in terms of trying to implement it may be costly, but your opportunity cost is essentially, if you begin to look at the governments that are around the world, which are probably the largest buyers of any goods and materials and so on out there, they're implementing, requirements when they purchase to have things that are accessible for their workers, for their employees, for the benefit of those that are going to be consuming these products and so on as well. So if you don't implement it, those opportunities, whether it be, you're buying computers or you're buying office equipment or whatever the case may be, are suddenly gone. You can't hit those opportunities any further, and that's definitely the business side of it. Certainly, if you don't have that implemented, you don't have VPATs, you don't have a number of other things that are all part of the workflow to supply it to an organization that is culturally set up to be accessible, you've suddenly lost that opportunity to go after that part of that business.
Great, thanks, Dennis. I want to, we're almost out of time, but Mansi, you made some good points in terms of that relate to this question earlier about just I think you were saying, what are the kind of highest ROI with the lowest, or the highest ROI things you can change? And you talked about keyboard and alt text. Can you kind of just speak to that a little bit?
Did you mean Mansi or Rajni?
Yeah, I think Mansi was saying that if you just add keyboard changes and alt text, unless I think that's what you
right.
said,
We
Mansi.
heard the software developer side of the athlete.
Yeah.
So I didn't get your question, Ward. If we can add.
Oh, yeah. So Kurt's point and Dennis's point is you don't have to think of this as an all or nothing implementation if you've got an existing app. And earlier you mentioned that there's a few things that you can do with relatively low cost that would have a big impact. And you mentioned alt text and the keyboard things. I wonder if you could just speak to that a little bit more.
Yeah, that is that if we add, if we make investments right at the beginning of software development, I think we can come up with like all the standards are followed initially. If they are followed initially, we won't have to increase the engineering cost at the end of the deployment or maybe at the time of user acceptance. So I think beginning will be the first time by adding, like reducing the cost of making every app or everything that we're developing being more accessible.
Great, thank you. Okay, so we are out of time, and I want to thank all of our panelists again. This has been a great discussion. I learned a lot, and hopefully all of the participants did as well. Again, we will have a recording out as well as links to any any information that was shared during this panel to all the participants very soon. So look for that. And thank you again for joining. Have a very good day, and again, happy Global Accessibility and Awareness Day.
Thank you, everyone. Wonderful.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. It was great.
Thank you.
Thank you.